you doing, guys? Today we're going to start the 2 steps back in order to go 1 step forward, and that is completely due to my inexperience in restoring a Wheelhorse Senior. That dog never stops. Jesus Christ. Anyways, what I thought I could do, obviously, is put the whole rear end together, bolt it to the frame, eventually rebuild the engine, rebuild the transmission, put the two together, okay? Slide it forward, get the drive shaft and the torque tube all in place. Well, that is not the case. You cannot, at least I can't do it on this tractor. So what I'm gonna have to do, because I got the engine, the transmission, everything all bolted in and nice and tight and stuff, and you can't go any further because of the frame here. I could take the steering bar off, but you have to lift you gotta lift the engine up and out. Well, then that misaligns the drive shaft. So basically what I need to do is I need to disassemble the entire rear section, because the way it's bolted in is right here. The bolts go from the inside out. So I got to get these gear cases off in order to get to those bolts. So that way I could take this whole banjo rear end, push it back, put the drive shaft, drive shaft torque tube, and then bring that whole thing forward in order to get into the yoke and to tighten the bolts down. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this thing, move it out to the center of the garage, and tear apart the entire rear section of the tractor. Now, when I put this together years ago, you know, there was a couple things after I had put it all together that I thought, hey, you know what, I probably should have done this a little different. Maybe that didn't quite work out the way I wanted. So this is actually not necessarily a bad thing. This is probably like a 30% good thing. Take this entire thing apart, make sure I had put it together correctly the first time, and just really make sure I do the attention to detail. So in this video, we're going to tear it all apart, kind of like a remake of the original video from years and years ago that I tore this thing apart. So let me get this thing out into the garage. Let me get things braced up and kind of supported. We'll get the tires off and we'll start taking this thing apart. I'll quickly go over to the other side, but I just want to let you know what I did. Took the cotter pin off, took the big nut washer off, got my gear puller, centered it on the axle shaft, gripped this little section of the brake drum itself, light popped right off. So we are faced with this. Initial review of how I put this all back together, it looks like it's in good shape. I'm going to have to take this bar off, which is just finger tight, so I'm going to leave it on because I don't feel like messing up the cotter pin there. So I'll just unhook it here, slide it forward, get it out of the way. We do have these 4 big bolts. I have to take those off, and that will separate the backing plate from the gear case. And then from there, I'll have to get the bolts on the gear case, and I'll have to try to break the seal that I created there, unfortunately. But everything there looks real good. I have the brake drum right there. You can see it's filled with grease. I'm going to make sure I put more grease in it before. I think I probably should have put more grease in there than I did. So I'm going to make sure I really pack that really good with grease. But overall, it looks real good. The key is right here for the shaft. So initially here at this juncture, everything looks fine. So let me go ahead and get those 4 bolts off. Let's get that backing plate off the gear case, and then we'll start talking about how we're going to take the gear case cover off. Everything came apart real nice. I took these 4 bolts off, the backing plate with the brakes, everything came off real good. Doesn't look like the gasket I made broke or ripped, just needs to be cleaned up, so we'll just leave that there. That's why I put the bolts back in, was so that gasket doesn't get destroyed. Again, left all the brakes attached to the backing plate. In my opinion, there's no need to take that apart. There's a seal on the back side of this. I think I put that in the wrong way. So I'm going to have to take a look at that when I go ahead and reassemble it, okay? What we need to do now is going to be the trickiest part, in my opinion. I got to take all these bolts out, all the way around. And I did use some Durco sealer on this, so this is sealed to this plate. So I'm going to have to be really careful trying to get that cover off the plate. Ultimately, it's too cold outside to kind of like reseal it. So the goal today is to get this thing apart, all apart, get the rear end off the frame. So that way, when it does warm up, I can reseal these, reseal the gearbox, all that stuff. So let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and get these bolts off, and then watch me struggle to get this gear case off without, causing any problems. I'm gonna put some rugs and stuff down just in case if I lose control of this, it doesn't come crashing on the floor and break or anything to that effect. Okay, to separate the gear case, you can see I got it going. I just left a bunch of these little bolts in, about 4 or 5 of them left. And then I just took my rubber mallet and I lightly tapped each head, not hard, very, very light, just to hopefully send a shock wave through things. I was able to get just a hair of a crack up here. I was able to get my blade in. That kind of got me a little bit more space. And then I was able to take this gasket scraper, get it between, and I'm just going to work it around, leaving the bolts in place. And then at the last second, I'll take all the bolts off except the top one, and then just slide that gear case off, and we should be in pretty good shape. That went a lot easier than I anticipated. You can see here's the 4 bolts that hold the rear end to the frame. I'm not going to take those out yet. I'm going to go ahead and take the other side apart. This is the gear that I machined years ago. You can see it's leaving that in place. There's no need to remove that. The bearing is fine, not removing that. But we are going to move on to this other side right here and get this apart, so that way we can get the actual banjo rear end off the frame. I probably should have shown, I got this thing set up with jack stands and this board, so that way when I took the weight off that side, nothing tips around. I'm ultimately going to just push the tractor back where it is with the rear end off it, so that way I can go ahead and clean everything, or like clean all the sealer off and get it prepared and ready for the full reinstallation, because I'm going to put the drive shaft and the torque tube in first before I slide that rear end eventually. All right, so let me go ahead and get this side apart, and then we'll take a look at getting the actual banjo rear end off the frame. Quick time lapse of the process I use to disassemble the gear drive. Wow, that came apart a lot easier than I anticipated. Maybe that sealer isn't working very well, but that's for a later date. What we've got going on here is I got the frame supported by the jack stands. I have the board under the rear, under the plates on the rear, and the jack holding that up. The bolts are still tight, but I want to just kind of support it because I don't want it to slide down or fall down as I'm taking these bolts out. So I'm going to go ahead, loosen up all the bolts. I'll probably take the two outsides on each side out and then take one and then figure out how I'm going to slide it back and get it out of the way. But once I get that done, it's pretty much ready to go back together after some cleaning and getting rid of some of the oil and stuff that might cause a leak. But outside of that, pretty simple. I'm just going to take the 4 nuts and washers and bolts out, and we'll get this thing off. And there it is. It's back halved. I'm going to go ahead and move the tractor back over here for the time being to get it out of the way. And then I'm just going to start the cleaning process. And what I mean by the cleaning process is just remove all the gasket sealer that I have on the 2 plates, and then on the gear cases, the gear case covers themselves. Get that all cleaned up real nice. Just kind of go over the bits and pieces, make sure everything is, everything's fine. No, there's no stupidity. And we'll go ahead and start putting this all back together. But that's going to be in another video because we're going to go ahead and install the drive shaft, the torque tube. We'll get the rear end back in place, get the torque tube all done, bolt everything down nice and tight, and then we'll start resealing all the gear cases and the brake drums and everything like that. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you would, leave a comment below. All right, thank you very much. And as always, you have a great day.